My father has the same tattoo. The words floated through the crimson room like smoke from a distant fire, soft enough to be missed, sharp enough to cut. Preston Hale set down his whiskey glass. The ice inside had stopped clinking. So had every conversation at the 12-seat mahogany table. 8 capos turned at once. She stood in the doorway, a small girl no taller than the brass coat rack beside her. 8 years old. Maybe. Dark braid, resting on a navy blue backpack that was too big for her shoulders, scuffed white sneakers, a jacket buttoned wrong, the way a child dresses herself when no one is home to check. Preston did not move. The man at the head of the table, the man who owned every square inch of the North End waterfront, the man whose name made city councilors forget their own phone numbers, sat frozen in his leather chair like a statue someone had forgotten to unveil. How did she get in here? The question came from Sal Bianchi, the oldest capo in the room, and his voice had the texture of broken gravel. 2 soldiers near the door reached for their jackets. Preston lifted one finger. They stopped like dogs, pulled back on a chain. The girl did not flinch. Her eyes moved across the room the way a deer reads a forest, measuring, counting, staying alive. She stopped at Preston. "What did you say, sweetheart?" His voice came out calmer than he felt. Years of practice. The voice he used when a judge was nervous, when a dock worker lied about skimming, when his own heart was trying to crawl up his throat. "I said my father has the same tattoo as you." She raised her left arm. The sleeve of her jacket slid back, and in her small fist was a folded square of notebook paper. She unfolded it slowly, carefully, as though the creases held something alive. Then she held it out, a drawing, pencil on lined paper, the kind of paper a child tears from a school notebook. 2-headed eagle, wings spread, talons wrapped around the Roman numeral 7. Preston's left hand drifted to his right wrist. Under his cuff, inked into his skin for as long as he could remember being a man, was the same symbol, same angle of the wings, same curl of the talons, same 7. 3 people on the face of the earth knew that mark existed. One of them was dead. One of them was sitting 2 seats down from him. The third was Preston himself. No one outside that list had ever seen it. Not his tailor. Not the women he brought to the penthouse. Not the photographers who sometimes caught him leaving charity galas. He wore long sleeves for a reason. The room had gone so quiet he could hear the radiator tick against the far wall. "Where did you get that?" His voice had changed now. Thinner. A crack running through it like a hairline fracture in glass. The little girl folded the paper back up with the same care. She tucked it into the pocket of her jacket. Then she looked at him with eyes that were too steady, too ready, too old. "My mother told me," she said, "that you are the only one who can remember the truth." Something behind Preston's eyes split open. A white room, a needle, the wet red taste of copper on his tongue. A voice screaming a name he could not hear through the ringing, through the gunfire, through the sound of something heavy hitting a tile floor. His own name, maybe, or someone else's. He could not tell anymore. He gripped the edge of the table. His knuckles went the color of old bone. The girl took one step into the room, and the world Preston Hale had built on 6 years of silence began, quietly, to fall apart. 6 years earlier, on a rain-slicked stretch of Starro Drive, a black Mercedes had wrapped itself around a concrete divider at 90 miles an hour. The driver was pronounced dead at the scene. The passenger, one Preston Hale, 31 years old, was pulled from the wreckage with a cracked skull and no pulse. Paramedics brought him back twice, on the ride to Mass General. When he opened his eyes 4 days later, he did not know what year it was. He did not know the name of the woman crying beside his bed. He did not know why his wrist ached under the gauze. What he knew was this. He was the heir. He was the last Hale. And the family was waiting. He took the throne at an age when most men are still paying off law school loans. The youngest boss in the history of the Hale organization. Older capos muttered about it in kitchens and barber shops for about a week. And then one of them, a man named Donnie Falcone, said something impolite at the wrong dinner and was never seen again. After that, no one muttered. By the spring of the following year, Preston Hale owned the Boston waterfront the way most men own a coat. Every container that moved through the Conley terminal paid a tax he never had to name. The police commissioner's Christmas bonus came in a cream envelope delivered by a man who did not speak. A senior state senator, the kind who appeared on Sunday morning talk shows, still called him Mr. Hale when they spoke on private lines, and still called him back within the hour. He was 37 now, lean, dark hair cut short on the sides, a jaw that had been broken once and set crooked, which women seemed to find interesting and which men seemed to find unsettling. He wore suits the color of storm clouds. He smiled rarely and slept less, and he did not remember the first 3 decades of his life, Not one birthday. Not his mother's perfume. Not the first girl he had kissed, or the name of the dog he was told he had loved as a boy. The years before the Mercedes were a white sheet of paper with nothing written on it. Dr. Rebecca Stone, a neurologist on a generous monthly retainer, called it retrograde amnesia, complicated by severe psychological trauma. She told him, in her careful, hushed office on Newbury Street, that the memories were not coming back. She told him this every 3 months, for 6 years, in almost exactly the same words. The only thing his body had kept was the tattoo, a 2-headed eagle on the inside of his right wrist, wings spread, talons curled around the Roman numeral 7. He had asked about it once, early on, when the bandages first came off. No one in the family could tell him when he had gotten it. No one had been there. Not his uncle, not his cousins, not the capos who swore on their mothers that they had known him since he was a child. The mark was his, and his alone. And he had no memory of the needle that had put it there. He had learned, over the years, not to ask anymore. Marcus Doyle, his underboss and the closest thing he had to a brother, kept watch over him the way a wolf watches its one surviving pup. Marcus was 6 years older, shoulders built like a doorway, eyes the color of wet slate. He intercepted problems before they reached Preston's desk. He tasted Preston's coffee in the mornings for the first 2 years after the accident, without being asked. He loved the man the way loyal men love, quietly and without explanation. But sometimes, when Preston said something about the past and got it wrong, Marcus would look away just a half-second too fast, and Preston, who missed nothing, would feel his right hand drift to his left wrist, and he would rub slow circles over the ink there, over the eagle and the 7, the way a man rubs an old scar that has started, without warning, to itch. Sal Bianchi moved first. He rose from his seat with the slow creak of a man whose knees had argued with him for the last 2 decades, and he jerked his chin toward the 2 soldiers near the door. One of them stepped forward with a hand already extended, palm up, the way grown men reach for runaway toddlers in parking lots. "Come on, honey. You got lost. Let's find your mom." Preston's hand came up off the table. The soldier froze mid-step, his arm hovering in the air like a branch that had forgotten which way to fall. Every capo in the room caught the signal and fell still. The only sound was the radiator and the faint thrum of traffic on Hanover Street 4 floors below. "Boss." Marcus had not raised his voice. He never did. But the single word carried the weight of a slammed door. A kid walks into the Crimson Room at 9 at night, past 3 locked doors and 4 armed men, and she knows about the mark. That is not a lost child. That is a delivery. A delivery of what? A bomb. A wire. A message from somebody who wants us watching the wrong hand. Marcus took a step closer, lowering his voice until only Preston could hear. "Send her out. Let me walk her to a precinct. Let me ask her questions somewhere that is not this room." Preston did not look at him. He was looking at her. He was looking the way he had learned to look at everything since the accident, which was the way a man studies a language he suspects he used to speak. The jacket was faded denim at the cuffs, washed 100 times, but the collar was clean. The sneakers were a size too big. Her braid had been done by someone who knew what they were doing, tight and even. But the rubber band at the end was a plain brown drugstore loop. Someone had dressed this child with care, and that someone was not with her tonight. The backpack on her shoulders was dark blue with a faded unicorn patch sewn over a tear near the zipper. In her right hand, held against her chest the way a bird holds a wing it cannot fly on, was a manila envelope. "What is your name?" She lifted her chin. "Clara Whitman." Across the table, Marcus went the color of chalk. Preston saw it. He did not understand it. He filed it somewhere behind his teeth for later, and kept his eyes on the child. "Clara, how did you get here?" "The Greyhound bus. From Portland." She paused, remembering. "Portland, Maine, not the other one. My mother wrote it down." "And who is with you?" "Nobody." The answer landed in the room, with the flat sound of a stone dropping into still water. 8 grown men, men who had buried rivals and bribed judges and done worse things on Tuesdays, looked at a little girl who had crossed 2 state lines alone to say the 4 sentences she had come here to say. Preston stood. His chair whispered backward across the carpet. "Everyone out." Marcus took half a breath to argue. Preston did not turn to him. He simply waited, in the particular silence of a man who is used to being obeyed, and after a long moment Marcus clicked his tongue once against his teeth and jerked his head at the others. They filed out in single file. Marcus went last. At the doorway he paused and looked back, and whatever passed between the 2 men in that second was old and private and unspoken. The door clicked shut. Preston crossed the room and pulled out the chair nearest Clara. He sat down in it, slowly, so that his eyes were below hers. Show me what you brought. Clara laid the envelope on the table. She did not open it. She pushed it toward him with 2 small fingers, as though the weight of it belonged to him now and not to her. He opened the flap. 3 things inside: a folded letter, heavy cream paper, handwritten in a woman's careful looping script, a silver chain, fine as spider thread, with a pendant the size of a dime, and a photograph, creased down the middle from being carried too long in the wrong kind of pocket. He took the pendant first. He turned it over. A 2-headed eagle, wings spread, talons wrapped around the Roman numeral 7. He set it down with hands that were not quite steady and reached for the photograph. The man in the picture was standing on a wooden porch, somewhere green, somewhere quiet. A blonde woman stood beside him, laughing at something the camera had not caught. She was holding a newborn against her shoulder. The baby was asleep. The man holding her hand was Preston Hale. The same jaw, the same crooked smile he had seen in the mirror every morning for 6 years. The same dark hair, the same eyes. But Preston Hale had never been on that porch. Preston Hale had never held that baby. Preston Hale had never, in any life he could remember, stood beside a blonde woman laughing in the sun. The photograph began to tremble. It took him a moment to realize it was his own hand doing it. He could not speak. The photograph stayed in his hand, and his hand stayed in the air, and for a long stretch of seconds the only thing moving in the crimson room was the pulse in Preston's throat. Clara climbed onto the chair beside him without asking. She was small enough that her sneakers dangled 6 inches above the carpet. His name was Daniel, she said. Daniel Whitman. He was my father. The past tense registered before anything else did. Was? He died when I was 2. Preston lowered the photograph to the table. He pressed his palm flat over it, as if the image might lift up and float away if he did not hold it down. The blonde woman's laugh stared up through the edge of his fingers. Your mother. His voice came out in a rasp. The woman in the picture. Where is she now? Clara looked at her hands. Her nails were bitten down to the quick. She had picked at a hangnail on her left thumb until the skin around it had gone pink. She died. The word fell out of her the way a small stone drops down a deep well, 2 weeks ago. The hospital was in Portland. It was ovarian cancer. The doctor said stage 4. She tried chemo for a while. Then she stopped. Clara recited the medical vocabulary the way a child recites a poem she has been made to memorize for a school assembly, clean and flat and without understanding. Her name was Eleanor. Preston closed his eyes for one breath. Clara, I am so sorry. She told me things before she died. He opened his eyes. She told me that what everyone said about my father was not true, that there was no boat accident, that Dad did not drown off the coast of Nova Scotia the way the man in the suit told her he had. Clara reached into the pocket of her jacket and pulled the folded drawing of the tattoo back out. She laid it on the table beside the photograph. 2 identical eagles, one in pencil, one in silver, stared up at Preston from the polished wood. She said a different story. A real one. She said she should have told me sooner, but she was scared. Scared of what? Of the people who killed him. Preston's right hand found his left wrist without permission. The cuff of his jacket was in the way. He did not push it aside. He did not need to see the ink. He could feel it burning now, the way a brand burns years after the iron has cooled. Who told her he drowned? She did not remember the man's name. She said he was polite. He brought an envelope with money and a paper to sign, and he told her it was insurance, and he told her not to talk to reporters. She took the money because she had a baby. She took the money because there was nothing else. Clara. The little girl looked up. What did your mother ask you to do? Her voice did not shake. It should have. It did not. She said to find a man named Preston Hale. In Boston. She said he does not know. She said he does not know. But he owes my father a life. The room tilted. It was not a metaphor. The floor slid sideways under Preston's chair by what felt like a full inch. The chandelier above the table fractured into 3 chandeliers and then back into 1. He gripped the edge of the table with both hands and waited for his vision to settle. And while he waited, the thing in the back of his skull that had been asleep for 6 years woke up. White tile, fluorescent light, the kind that hummed. A needle, slim and cold, sliding into the crook of his arm. A voice above him, low, male, amused. When you wake up, you will be Preston Hale. He heard himself make a sound, a small, broken, animal sound. He clapped his hand over his mouth as if that could put the sound back. Chew? Clara was staring at him. Her eyes had gone very wide. Are you okay? Say it again. He could barely hear his own words over the buzzing in his ears. What did your mother tell you about your father and me? Say it exactly. Clara swallowed. She said my father died in your place. She said he died instead of you. The photograph on the table. The blonde woman laughing. The baby asleep on her father's shoulder. The father who had a face Preston saw every morning in the mirror, and a name Preston had never, in any life he could remember, worn. He stared at the two-headed eagle on the silver pendant, and for the first time in 6 years, Preston Hale understood, with a cold, clean certainty that had no memories attached to it, that the name stitched into every suit he owned and carved onto every deed he had ever signed might not actually belong to him. The penthouse was on the top floor of a glass tower overlooking the harbor, and Preston had chosen it 6 years ago because no one could reach it without passing through 3 card-keyed elevators and a private lobby. Tonight, for the first time, that security felt like it was meant to keep something in, not out. Rosa was waiting by the door when they arrived. She was 62, Portuguese, and she had raised 3 sons of her own before she had ever met Preston. She took one look at the child, the backpack, the dried tear track on Clara's cheek, and she did not ask a single question. She simply knelt down, took Clara's small hand in both of her large ones, and said, "There is soup on the stove. Come." Preston watched them walk down the hallway together. Clara looked back once, over her shoulder. He nodded. She went. He stood in the entryway for a full minute after they disappeared. Then he took out his phone, scrolled to the name Doyle, and held the green button down. "Get to the penthouse. Now." He hung up before Marcus could answer. The study at the far end of the apartment had a door that locked with an iron bolt. Preston locked it behind him, crossed to the mahogany desk under the window, and laid the manila envelope in the center of the blotter. He did not turn on the overhead light. The city outside did the work for him. The Zakim Bridge burned white across the middle distance. Somewhere a harbor buoy was ringing. It took Marcus 22 minutes. Preston heard the elevator chime, heard Rosa's murmur, heard the study door open and close. He did not turn around. "You ran the plates on that Greyhound bus yet?" "No, boss. Do not bother." Marcus stopped 2 paces into the room. Preston turned. He pulled the photograph out of the envelope and laid it on the desk, face up, under the soft spill of light from the city. "Tell me," Preston said, "why this man looks exactly like me." Marcus did not move toward the photograph. He did not need to. From where he was standing, he could see it perfectly well, and the color drained out of his face in one long, slow slide, the way water runs out of a bathtub when you pull the plug. He was silent for a long time. Preston watched him, counted the seconds, got to 30 before he spoke again. "Marcus, you should not have looked at that picture. Tell me why he looks like me." "Preston." Marcus's voice had gone quiet in a way Preston had never heard it go quiet. "There are some doors you do not open. Not because you cannot. Because once you do, you cannot put what comes out back in." "What doors?" The shout cracked out of him before he knew it was coming. His palms hit the desk on either side of the photograph. The pen holder jumped. A paperweight rolled 2 inches. "Who is he? Who am I?" "You knew. You have always known. You look away when I get something wrong about the past. You have looked away for 6 years. I saw it tonight. I have seen it 100 times. Stop. Lying. To me." Marcus closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "I know half of it," he said. "Only half. I swear to you on my mother's grave. That is all they ever told me. The rest, you are going to have to find yourself." "Then tell me the half." "No." Marcus shook his head once. "Not tonight. Not in this room. There are ears in this building that do not belong to you. Or to me." Preston stared at him. "You are telling me my own home is bugged. I am telling you that your uncle did not get where he is by being sloppy." The word uncle landed between them like a hammer on a glass table. "There is one man alive," Marcus said, "who knows all of it, every piece. He baptized you when you were 8 days old. He has waited 6 years for you to walk back through his door and ask the right question. Father Thomas, Street Leonard's, North End. Go tomorrow morning. Go alone. Take the little girl." "Why the girl?" "Because he will not believe it is really you until he sees her." Preston's mouth had gone dry. He reached for the edge of the desk to steady himself. "Marcus, my uncle, Arthur." He said it carefully, the way a man walks across a frozen pond. "Can I trust him?" Marcus looked at him for a long, still moment. "Do not trust anyone in the family," he said. "Not your uncle, not the Capos, not Rosa, not Dr. Stone. A beat. Not me." Preston did not sleep. He sat at the window of the study until the harbor turned gray, and then pink, and then the soft gold color that Boston reserves for the first hour of daylight. He did not pour himself a drink. He did not open the laptop. He watched the city wake up and he listened. Through 2 closed doors, to the small sound of Clara breathing in the guest bedroom down the hall. At 6:30, he went and knocked softly on her door. "Clara, get dressed. We are going to a church." She came out in the same denim jacket, rubbing sleep from her eye with the heel of her hand. Rosa had brushed her hair. There was a small paper bag from the kitchen in her fist that smelled of warm bread. They took the back stairs. Preston drove himself. No driver, no second car, no call ahead to Marcus. He cut through the still empty streets of the North End in a silver sedan that no one in the organization knew he owned, and he parked 2 blocks from Prince Street and walked the rest of the way holding Clara's hand. Street Leonard's was the oldest Italian parish in New England. The stone facade had gone the color of weak coffee after a century of winters. Preston had driven past it more times than he could count. He had never once, as far as he knew, stepped inside. The door groaned when he pushed it. Inside, the air smelled of beeswax and cold marble. Candles flickered in a rack near the entrance. The pews were empty, except for one very old woman with a rosary. And, near the altar, a small figure in a black cassock arranging something on a side table. Preston walked down the center aisle with Clara beside him. The priest turned at the sound of their footsteps. He was in his early 70s. White hair, what was left of it, combed flat against a tanned skull. Shoulders stooped a little under the weight of the years. Wire-rimmed glasses. The face of a man who had spent a very long life listening to things he was not allowed to repeat. He looked at Preston. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He put one hand on the back of the nearest pew to keep himself standing. "Father Thomas," Preston began. The priest lifted his other hand to silence him. Not rudely. The way a man silences a radio, so he can hear whether the sound outside is wind or footsteps. Father Thomas walked forward, slowly, step by step, until he was close enough to touch Preston's face. His thumb brushed the small white scar near Preston's left eyebrow, and then the old man began to cry. "My son," he whispered. "My son, I have prayed for this day for 6 years." Preston's throat closed. "Father, I do not understand. I have never been inside this church. You have been inside this church more times than you have been inside any other building on earth. I baptized you myself. I poured the water over your head." Father Thomas wiped his cheek with the back of his hand and smiled through the tears, a broken, watery smile. "Your real name is Nathaniel. Nathaniel Hale. You are the firstborn son of Vincent Hale, and you have been missing for 6 years. Clara made a small sound beside him. Preston could not make any sound at all. Father Thomas gestured them toward a side chapel with a low wooden bench. They sat. 6 years ago, the priest said, you came to me on a Thursday night. You were shaking. You had found ledgers. You had found phone records. Your Uncle Arthur was selling the Conley terminal routes, piece by piece, to the O'Brien family in Charlestown. He was gutting your father's organization from the inside. You came to ask me, as a priest, whether it was a sin to go to your own father with what you knew. What did you tell me? I told you the 5th commandment was about honoring a father, not protecting him from the truth. You left here to drive to Vincent's house. You never arrived. 3 nights later, your grandfather Vincent died of what the doctors called a sudden heart attack. 2 nights after that, your car was pulled out of the Charles River, burned to the frame. The family buried a closed casket. Preston stared at him. Then how am I here? Because they did not kill you, Nathaniel. Father Thomas reached across and laid a trembling hand on Preston's wrist, directly over the tattoo. They erased you. They put you to sleep and emptied your head and sent you back wearing your own face, so that Arthur would have a puppet on the throne instead of a corpse. Clara had gone very, very still. Then who died? She asked. Her voice was so small. If it was not him, who was in the car? Father Thomas turned to the little girl. The tears came back all at once, faster this time. Your father, child, he said. Your father, Daniel Whitman. Clara did not cry. That was the thing Preston would remember later, when he replayed the moment in the dark. She sat very still on the wooden bench beside him, her small hands folded in her lap, and she looked at Father Thomas with the grave face of a child who had already done most of her crying in a hospital room 2 weeks earlier, and had none left to spare for a name. Tell me about him, she said. Please, tell me everything. Father Thomas wiped his glasses on the hem of his cassock and put them back on with hands that were still unsteady. Your father was a mechanic, he began. In Portland, he fixed lobster boats and pickup trucks and, on Sundays, he fixed the lawnmower at the church on Forest Avenue for free because the priest there was his cousin's friend. That is how I learned about him. 6 months before Nathaniel disappeared, that priest in Portland called me. He said, Father Thomas, "There is a man in my parish who is the identical twin of a boy I once saw in a newspaper photograph at a wedding in Boston," he said. "It is the strangest thing. It is as though God made two of the same man." Preston closed his eyes. Arthur had been watching. Father Thomas went on. "He had a private investigator on retainer, an ugly man named Halloran, and Halloran was always looking for what Arthur called contingencies. Somehow that photograph, or one like it, found its way to Halloran's desk, and Halloran found his way to Portland. He took Daniel. In October, 6 years ago. Daniel was walking home from the garage where he worked. A van pulled up beside him. He did not come home that night." Father Thomas's voice cracked. "Eleanor called every hospital between Portland and Boston. She called the state police. She filed a missing persons report. She was 4 months pregnant with the child sitting next to you." Clara pressed her lips together and said nothing. "Arthur kept your father for 6 months. Somewhere in the Berkshires, I believe. A cabin. He made him learn." Father Thomas turned to Preston. "How you spoke. The way you walked into a room. The names of your capos. The layout of the house in Beacon Hill. The names of the women your mother had lunch with on Tuesdays. They beat the information into him for 180 days. Preston's hand had gone around Clara's without his asking it to. The plan, as Arthur first sold it to the 2 men who helped him, was simple. Put Daniel in Nathaniel's place for a few weeks, long enough for Nathaniel to be declared dead quietly, long enough to finalize the transfer of the shipping routes to the O'Brien family. Then the substitute would have his own convenient accident, and Arthur would step in to run the organization during the grieving period, and no one would ever be the wiser. "But he changed the plan," Preston said. "He did. Arthur is not a clever man. He is only a greedy one. Somewhere in those 6 months it occurred to him that a living puppet with no memory was a better instrument than a dead one. A dead boss leaves behind lawyers and inheritance disputes and capos asking questions. But an heir who survives a terrible accident and wakes up grateful to be alive, who leans on his uncle to learn a business he no longer remembers, who signs whatever his uncle puts in front of him." The priest's mouth twisted. "That is a throne you can sit behind for the rest of your life." So he switched them. The man you saw in the river that November was Daniel Whitman, dressed in your suit, driving your car, carrying your wallet. Dental records were forged. The body was burned past recognition. The story was handed to the newspapers the next morning by a press officer who worked for the O'Brien family, and the funeral was closed casket by the following Saturday. Preston thought of the casket. He had not attended. He had been, at that point, still unconscious in a private clinic that no state medical registry had on file. And Daniel. His voice had gone hoarse. "Daniel played me. For how long? 3 months. September, October, November. Your mother went to her grave, believing she had lost her son twice. Once to the accident, and once to the blank stare he gave her when he came home." Father Thomas looked down at his hands. "She is in the cemetery in Medford. She does not know, even now, that her real son is alive." "Eleanor." Clara spoke for the first time since the priest had begun. "What did they tell my mother?" "They told her your father had been drinking. They told her his body had been found washed up on a rocky stretch of coast near Lubeck, 3 days after a squall. They gave her $18,000 in cash in a brown envelope and a form to sign that said she would not speak to reporters. She did not speak to reporters." The priest's voice softened. "She never stopped looking, child. She simply looked quietly." Preston turned, then, and looked at the little girl sitting on the bench beside him. He had not been able to see it in the restaurant. He had not been able to see it in the lamplight of the penthouse study. But here, in the dim gold of the votive candles, with the grief of a 70-year-old priest hanging in the air between them, he saw it all at once. Clara Whitman had her mother's hair, and her mother's narrow shoulders, and her mother's quiet hands. But the shape of her mouth, and the set of her jaw, and the small crease that appeared between her eyebrows when she was thinking hard about something that hurt her. All of it belonged to the man in the photograph, the man who had died wearing Preston's name. Preston unbuttoned his cuff. He did it slowly, without looking at either of them, and he rolled the sleeve of his shirt back to the elbow. The ink on the inside of his wrist caught the candlelight. "Father, what is this?" "That," said Father Thomas, "is the oldest secret this church keeps." The priest stood. His knees cracked. He crossed himself without thinking about it, and walked toward a narrow wooden door set into the wall behind the altar. Preston followed, Clara's hand still inside his. The door led down 3 stone steps into a small room that smelled of dust and old leather. The sacristy. On a shelf behind the vestments, Father Thomas lifted down a ledger. The cover was cracked black leather, the spine stamped in faded gold with the words Baptism Register. It looked older than the priest himself. The Hale family did not begin in Boston, Father Thomas said, laying the ledger on the wooden counter. They began in a small village above Palermo, in 1861, the year Italy became a country. The first Hale was not called Hale. He was called Aquila, Eagle. He led 7 men across a mountain pass to escape a blood feud, and 6 of them died along the way. He reached the coast with 1 nephew and 3 stolen horses, and he swore an oath over the body of his youngest brother that he would never again trust a count beyond 7. Preston stared at the ink on his wrist. 7. The number of the living, the number of the trusted. Every generation since, the firstborn son of the family has been marked with this sign on the morning of his 18th birthday, and told the story, and given the names of the 6 men he is permitted to trust. The 7th name is always his own, and it is done here. It has always been done here, in this church, in this sacristy, by the priest who holds the needle. You, me. Father Thomas met his eyes. I put that mark on your skin, Nathaniel. I held your wrist in my own hand. Your father stood behind you with his palm on your shoulder so you would not flinch. He opened the ledger, pages of looping Latin script, names and dates going back more than 100 years. He turned them, one after another, until he came to a page near the back. He laid it flat under Preston's hand. A date in September. An entry in the careful black hand of a younger Father Thomas. Nathaniel Vincent Hale, age 18, marked, and underneath, in a different hand altogether, in blue fountain pen, the careful letters of a man who had signed his name to 100 dockyard contracts. My son, Vincent Hale, my son. Preston reached out. He touched the ink. The moment his fingertip brushed the letter V, something inside his skull broke open in a way it had not broken open in the restaurant, or in the study, or in the candlelight of the side chapel. It was not a flash. It was a flood, a summer morning, the hum of cicadas through an open window at the back of this same sacristy. He was 18 years old, shirtless in a wooden chair, his wrist braced on a folded white towel. The needle was hot. It hurt in a deep, patient way. Behind him, a heavy hand lay flat on his shoulder, pinning him gently, steadying him. He could smell his father's aftershave, bay rum and cigar smoke. The younger Father Thomas bent over the wrist, and Vincent Hale, leaning down until his cheek was almost against his son's ear, said, in a low, rough voice that Preston had not heard in 6 years, but which he now, horribly, remembered in every register, Questo segno ti proteggerà, my son. It is the promise of the family. This mark will protect you, my son. It is the promise of the family. Preston made a sound. He put both hands flat on the wooden counter and bent forward over the ledger and made a sound that was not a sob and not a word. Something older than either, something that came from the part of him that had been standing in a locked room for 6 years waiting for somebody to open the door. A small hand slid into his. Clara did not say anything at first. She just held on. Then, when his breathing had steadied by 1 degree, she looked up at him with her serious 8-year-old face and said, very quietly, You are remembering, are you not? Preston could not speak. He nodded, just once. A tear slid down the side of his nose, hung for a moment at his jaw, and fell onto the page, onto the ink, onto his father's handwriting, onto the word Figlio. He had not cried in 6 years. Father Thomas, across the counter, bowed his head and began, silently, to pray. And on the page between them, his father's careful blue letters drank the tear and held it, like a promise finally remembered. They left the church through a side door that led out onto a narrow alley behind Prince Street. Father Thomas pressed a small brass key into Preston's palm before they went. For the sacristy, if you have nowhere else, you come here. Day or night. I do not lock the alley door. Preston did not answer. He slipped the key into the inner pocket of his jacket, next to the silver pendant with the 2-headed eagle, and he walked Clara back to the silver sedan in silence. She did not ask questions on the drive. She knew, in the way that children who have been raised quietly by grieving mothers sometimes know, that the man behind the wheel needed the next 15 minutes of his life to put himself back together. She watched the city slide by the window and held her backpack on her lap and did not speak. Preston pulled into the parking garage beneath the tower at 11:15. He took the elevator up. He passed his thumb across the biometric scanner. The penthouse door slid open. The smell of espresso hit him first. Arthur was sitting in the white leather chair by the window, one leg crossed over the other, a small porcelain cup resting on the arm of the chair beside a folded newspaper. He had let himself in. He had, in point of fact, had a key for 6 years. Nephew, there you are. Rosa was beginning to worry. Preston did not move from the doorway. Arthur Hale was 58 years old, and he wore his age the way certain wealthy men wear it, which is to say like a well-tailored coat, silver hair cut close, gold-rimmed glasses, a charcoal suit without a wrinkle in it, a small, pleasant, permanent smile that showed no teeth and did not reach his eyes. His eyes found Clara. They rested on her for 1 second longer than was polite. Preston saw the quick mechanical click behind them, the way a jeweler's loop clicks into place over a stone, the appraisal, the estimation of weight and worth and danger. Then the smile did its small, practiced shift. And who is this young lady? Preston was surprised by how easily the lie came. This is Amelia. Her father and I went to school together. He is going through a divorce, ugly one, and I promised I would keep her for a few days while he and her mother work things out in court. Arthur raised his eyebrows with exactly the right amount of indulgent surprise. A father keeping a child for a friend. Nathaniel, I did not know you had it in you. The name slipped out so naturally that for a full beat Preston did not realize what had happened. Then he did. Arthur had called him Preston for 6 years in every room in every city. Arthur had called him Preston to his face at the dinner table 3 nights ago. And yet here, alone, in the presence of a strange child, Arthur had said Nathaniel, and he had said it with the small amused lift of a man who has been holding a joke at the end of his tongue for a very long time, and has decided, just once, to let the tip of it show. Preston did not react. He walked further into the room. He set his keys on the console table. He did not look at Clara. I was not expecting you, Uncle. No, you never are. Arthur set the porcelain cup on the table beside him with a soft click. I came because we have a small problem on the pier tonight. One of the O'Brien trucks was stopped at the gate without the proper paperwork. Benny handled it. But there are going to be questions by morning, and I think it would be useful if you were the face that met those questions. A show of confidence. 10 o'clock. Pier 4. I will be there. Good. Arthur stood. He smoothed his suit jacket with 2 light brushes of his palm. You have been quiet these last 2 days, nephew. Distracted. Rosa tells me you did not sleep last night. Rosa tells you a great deal. Rosa remembers who signed her last 3 Christmas bonuses. Arthur crossed the room. He stopped in front of Preston and laid one light, manicured hand on Preston's shoulder. You know I have protected you for 6 years. Since the accident. Every day. From every direction. You remember that, do you not? The word remember sat between them like a loaded pistol on a glass table. I remember, Uncle. Good boy. Arthur nodded to Clara, who had not moved, and walked out. The door closed behind him with the soft, pneumatic hiss of a seal being broken. Preston stood perfectly still for 10 seconds. Then he took his phone out of his pocket, turned it all the way off, dropped it in the drawer of the console table, and began to move. He found the first device inside the lip of the bookshelf in the living room. Fresh adhesive. The heat of the glue had not fully set. The second was in the smoke detector above the kitchen island. The third was in the lampshade beside the couch where Clara had been sitting last night. He did not remove them. He did not need to. He had what he needed. He crossed to where Clara stood by the window and he knelt down in front of her. Clara, I know. You heard him call me Nathaniel. Yes. He put his hands on her small shoulders. I am going to keep you safe. I swear that to you on every name I have ever worn, but from this moment, the 2 of us are being hunted. Do you understand what that word means? Clara nodded. She had known what the word meant since she was 2 years old. Good girl. Then pack the backpack. We leave in 10 minutes. The safe house Preston used was not on any Hale property deed. It was a 3rd-floor walk-up in Somerville that he had bought 8 years ago, before the accident, under a shell company whose only other asset was a single postal box in Delaware. He had bought it, apparently, for exactly the reason he was now using it. He did not remember the transaction. He did not need to. The key was where a man who had once been Nathaniel Hale had told himself to leave it, taped inside the meter box in the hallway, and the door opened on hinges that had not been oiled in years. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that faced a brick wall, a narrow balcony with a cast-iron railing, no telephone, no television, a bookshelf with 28 books, all of them in Italian. Preston set Clara's backpack on the couch. This is where we are going to sleep tonight. Nobody knows about this place. Not Rosa, not Marcus, not the man who just left my apartment. Do you understand? Yes, there is a bedroom at the end of the hall. Rosa packed you some clothes and a book. Go. Try to rest. Clara looked at him for a long moment, Then she did something she had not done in the 36 hours since she had walked into the crimson room. She walked forward and pressed her small forehead against his chest for 2 seconds. She did not hug him. She just leaned, briefly, the way a tired animal leans against a wall. Then she walked down the hall. Preston stood in the dark kitchen for a long time. He lay down on the couch, still dressed. He did not expect to sleep. He lasted, perhaps, 17 minutes. The ceiling is white. The ceiling is the first thing. It is tiled, the kind of tile you find in hospitals and morgues, rectangular and acoustic, stained at one corner where a pipe has leaked and no one has bothered to fix it. There is a single long fluorescent tube above his face. It is humming. It is the only sound in the room. His wrists are tied. Soft restraints, padded, the kind designed not to leave bruises. There is a bandage around his head that is tight enough to hurt, and a needle taped into the crook of his left arm, and a thin, clear tube running up from that needle to a bag of something colorless hanging on a pole. His mouth is dry. His tongue feels too big. A door opens to his right. His uncle's face comes into view, warm and concerned, the gold rims of his glasses catching the fluorescent light. He lays a hand on the side of Nathaniel's cheek the way an uncle lays a hand on a sick nephew's cheek. "Oh, my boy, my poor boy, you are awake," Nathaniel tries to speak. Something in the drip has taken his voice. He can shape the words with his mouth, but the sound will not come. "You were in a terrible accident, nephew. A truck on the river road. You have been asleep for 4 days. I have been here every night." Arthur's thumb strokes his cheekbone. "I have news, and I am so sorry to be the one to give it to you. Your father, my brother, Vincent, he is gone. A heart attack, the night before last. He went in his sleep, Nathaniel. He did not suffer." Nathaniel's chest seizes. Tears slide sideways out of his eyes into his hair. His throat works. No sound. A second door opens at the other end of the room. Another man walks in. He is thinner than Nathaniel. Paler. His hair has been cut the same way and dyed the same color, and someone has shaved him this morning with the same straight razor Nathaniel has used every morning of his adult life. He is wearing one of Nathaniel's suits. Charcoal. The one with the thin blue thread in the lapel. The man's eyes find Nathaniel's. They are full of something that is not cruelty. They are full of terror. Arthur turns to him, pleasantly, the way one turns to a waiter. "You did beautifully at the funeral, Daniel. The speech especially. Even the widow believed you." He smiles. "Now comes the last small favor. It is time for you to die properly." The man, Daniel, makes a sound. It is the sound a deer makes in a trap when it understands, finally, what the trap is for. 2 men in dark jackets step in behind him and take his arms. They are not rough. They do not need to be. Daniel's knees are already going out from under him. As they turn him toward the door, he looks back, over his shoulder, directly at Nathaniel. He mouths 3 words. Nathaniel cannot hear them. Nathaniel will spend the next 6 years not hearing them, but he sees the shape of them on the dying man's mouth, and the shape says, "Tell my daughter." The door closes. Somewhere far away, down a long tile hallway, a single, muffled gunshot. Preston lunged up off the couch with a scream that tore something in his throat. He was on his feet, both hands over his ears, shirt soaked through, before he knew where he was. The streetlight outside the window cut across the kitchen in orange bars. His hand found the edge of the counter. A small figure stood in the bedroom doorway, bare feet on the cold floor, arms wrapped around her own ribs. Clara did not ask what he had dreamed. She looked at his face in the orange light and she said, softly, "You saw my father, did you not?" Preston could not make words. He nodded, and Clara walked across the dark kitchen and sat down on the couch beside him, and she did not touch him, and she did not cry, and she did not leave. Morning came gray and slow through the kitchen window. Preston had not slept again. He had sat on the couch with Clara curled beside him, her cheek against the upholstery, until at some point near 4 a.m, her breathing had gone soft and even, and she had tipped sideways into a real sleep. He had pulled the throw blanket off the back of the couch and laid it over her without disturbing the weight of her head against his thigh. At 7, he brewed coffee on the stove with a battered aluminum mocha pot he did not remember owning. Clara woke when he set the mug on the table. She sat up, rubbed both eyes with her fists, and looked at the window for a long moment, placing herself. Then she reached for her backpack. She unzipped the main pocket. From inside, she took out a small, flat rectangle wrapped in a dish towel. She unwrapped it with the care of a child handling an egg. Inside was an envelope, cream-colored, sealed with a bead of clear wax. On the front, in a woman's hand, someone had written, "For Mr. Preston Hale, private." Mom wrote this in the hospital, Clara said. The week before she died. She told me I was only allowed to give it to you once I was sure you were going to listen. She held it out with both hands. Preston took it with both of his. He broke the wax seal with his thumb. He unfolded 2 pages of thin hospital stationery. The handwriting wavered in places the way a radio signal wavers in bad weather. The ink was blue. There were faint circular stains along the right edge where a water glass had sweated on the bedside table. Mr. Hale, if you are reading this, then Clara has found you. I do not know if that means you are a kind man or a cruel one. I only know what my husband was, and I only know what I was told about how he died, and I only know that for 6 years I have believed those 2 things could not both be true. My name is Eleanor Whitman. Daniel was my husband. He disappeared from a sidewalk on Cumberland Avenue in Portland, Maine, on a Thursday in October 6 years ago. The police told me, after 1 month, that they had no leads. After 3 months, a man in a dark blue suit came to my door. He said Daniel's body had been found washed up near Lubeck after a squall. He said there had been drinking. He said there would not be a funeral because the body was not fit for viewing. He gave me $18,000 in $20 bills in a brown paper envelope and a form with my signature line already marked, and he told me very politely that it would be better for Clara if I did not speak to reporters. I signed. I had a baby and no job and a mortgage and no mother of my own. I signed. But I kept looking, Mr. Hale. I looked quietly, for 6 years, in the way a woman looks for a thing she has been told she is not allowed to find. I found your accident. I do not know how else to say it. A man named Preston Hale, in Boston, was pulled from the Charles River on the same night my husband was said to have drowned 300 miles away. The paper ran a small item, Mafia heir in coma. I clipped the article out and kept it in a drawer under the silverware. I looked at it on bad nights when Clara was asleep. I did not understand what it meant. I only understood that a coincidence of dates like that one does not happen without a hand behind it. I tried to learn more. One afternoon a man followed me home from the grocery store. He stood in my driveway and he did not say a word, and he simply looked up at Clara's bedroom window for almost 2 full minutes. And then he walked away. I stopped asking questions after that day. I am ashamed to write that. I was afraid for her. 3 months ago, the doctors told me there would be no 4th round of chemotherapy. I realized then that my fear was about to belong to my daughter alone, and that if I did not give her something to hold on to before I went, she would grow up with nothing but that fear. So I told her. I gave her your name and a bus station address, and the photograph I had hidden for her in the lining of her winter coat. I am not asking you to avenge my husband. I am too tired to want revenge. I am asking you this instead. If any part of you, any small stubborn piece, already knew that you owed my Daniel a life, then please let my Clara be the thing you pay that debt to. Let her have one person in this world who does not lie to her. Let her have a family to call a home. That is all. Eleanor Whitman. Preston folded the pages. He laid them, with great care, back on the dish towel on the table. He pressed his palm flat over them for a moment. The way a man presses his palm flat over the place a knife has just gone in. Then he put his other hand over his eyes, and for the second time in 24 hours, he let himself cry. Clara did not move. She sat on the couch with her knees pulled up under her chin, and she watched a man she had known for less than 2 days mourn her mother the way her mother had deserved to be mourned, by someone who understood, at last, exactly what she had survived. Preston left Clara in the apartment with a locked door, a loaded pistol in the kitchen drawer she did not know about, and Father Thomas's phone number written on the inside of her wrist in blue pen. If I am not back by 3, you call that number. The priest will come for you. Do you understand? Yes. Say it. If you are not back by 3, I call Father Thomas. Good girl. He took the back stairs down. He crossed 2 streets on foot, boarded a bus, rode it 4 stops, got off, walked another 6 blocks, and only then did he turn on a prepaid phone he had bought that morning at a gas station on Mystic Avenue. He dialed a number from memory. It is me, Daisy Diner in Medford, 40 minutes, alone. If I see one of our cars on the block, I am gone. He hung up before Marcus could say a word. The Daisy Diner had 8 booths, a counter lined with stools, and a waitress named Denise who had been refilling coffee since the first Bush administration. Preston took the booth at the back, the one with a view of the front door and a second exit through the kitchen. He ordered black coffee he did not drink. Marcus arrived in 34 minutes. He came in alone, no driver, wearing a canvas jacket Preston had never seen before. He slid into the booth across from Preston and set both hands flat on the formica between them, palms up. The gesture of a man showing he was not armed, even though they both knew perfectly well that he was. Preston did not waste the opening. You knew, from the day they brought me back. About Daniel, about me. You knew all of it. Marcus did not try to deny it. He did something worse. He nodded. Once. And the muscle at the corner of his jaw tightened the way a rope tightens around a mooring. Not all of it. Half. But the half I knew was enough. Talk. Marcus drew a breath. He looked at Denise, who was wiping down the counter at the far end of the room, and then back at Preston. Before the accident, I was your bodyguard. Yours, Nathaniel's. I had driven you since you were 23. I was the one your father trusted to stand outside the bathroom door when you were hung over at hotel weddings. When Vincent died, I was one of 4 men in the organization who knew the official story was wrong. Arthur killed the other 3 in the first 6 months. He kept me because I was useful, and because he thought I was too afraid of him to run. Were you? I was. Marcus's eyes did not leave Preston's. I have a mother, Nathaniel. She is 78. She lives in a yellow house in Revere with my sister and my sister's 2 kids. The day Arthur walked me into the clinic to see you for the first time after they rebuilt you, he stopped me in the hallway and showed me a photograph on his phone. It was a picture of that yellow house, taken from the curb, taken that morning. He did not say anything. He did not have to. Preston's knuckles were white around the coffee cup. So, you let me live 6 years inside a lie. I let you live 6 years. Yes. Marcus's voice had gone rough. I watched you, every day, from 3 feet behind your shoulder. I made sure you ate. I made sure nobody put a knife in you in a parking garage. I learned how to read the face you had when you were about to do something Arthur wanted, so I could find a reason to pull you out of the room. I kept you alive in the only way I was allowed to keep you alive. And I did not tell you the one thing you needed to know. Because if you had remembered, Nathaniel, if you had remembered any of it, he would have killed you that same night, and I was not going to lose you twice. Preston looked down at the table. Something hot was moving behind his eyes. He pushed it back. Dr. Stone, yes, she is his. Bought and paid for. The injections she gives you every 3 months. They are not for sleep. They suppress whatever the trauma left of your long-term memory. She has been rolling it back every quarter for 6 years. Small enough that you never notice the withdrawal. Steady enough that you never climb out of it. That is why you remember the tattoo but not the hand that drew it. Preston set the coffee cup down very carefully. He did not trust himself to hold it. How do I stop? You stop going to her appointments. You throw out anything she ever handed you. And you give your body about 72 hours of hell while it burns through what is already in you. Marcus reached inside his canvas jacket. I brought you something else. He set a small black flash drive on the table. He slid it across with 2 fingers. 3 years of work. Every ledger Arthur thinks nobody copied. Every phone number. The meetings with the O'Briens. Photographs. The surgeon who altered your face. The nurses who signed off on your discharge. The forged dental records from the car in the river. Marcus held Preston's eyes. I did not know if you would ever wake up enough to want it. I kept it anyway. Preston closed his hand around the drive. Why now? Why tell me now? Because of her. Clara. The moment she walked into the Crimson Room, you were going to remember. There was no universe left where you did not. Marcus's mouth twisted into something that was not quite a smile. And if you were going to remember, Nathaniel, then I was done protecting you with silence. I am ready to protect you with the truth. Preston slipped the drive into his inner pocket. He had one ally now. He still did not know if it was enough. Preston came back to the safe house at 2:30. Clara was sitting at the kitchen table with a peanut butter sandwich she had made herself and a library book about horses Rosa had slipped into her backpack. She looked up. She did not ask how it had gone. She simply slid the plate of sandwich halves toward the empty chair across from her. Preston took 1 half. He had not realized he was hungry until the bread was in his mouth. Then he opened the laptop he had bought from a pawn shop on the walk back. He slid the black flash drive into the port. The laptop took a long moment to read the files. When the folder opened, there were 47 items inside. Marcus had organized them. Subfolders with names like medical, roots, stone, offshore, meetings. And at the very top, a single document in its own folder, titled simply, The Will. Preston opened it, 12 pages scanned in color. Letterhead in the top corner that read Fitzpatrick, Moreno and Hale, attorneys at law. A date of execution, 11 years old. The signature of Vincent Hale at the bottom of each page, and beside it, the signatures of 2 witnesses and a notary with a raised stamp that had caught the scanner light. Preston read. He read slowly. He had not remembered that he knew how to read a legal document, but his eyes moved down the page now with the confidence of a man who had once had a desk in a law office his father had paid for. The Latin terms fell into place. The clauses organized themselves in his head. To my son, Nathaniel Vincent Hale, I leave the entirety of the residual estate, including all shares, real holdings, and operating interests of the Hale Shipping Company and its subsidiary enterprises, to be transferred upon his 32nd birthday or upon my death, whichever occurs later. To my younger brother, Arthur Francis Hale, I leave a 10% minority equity interest in the Hale Shipping Company, together with a lifetime stipend of $200,000 per annum, in recognition of his years of service to the family. No further claim upon the estate shall be entertained. Preston read the clause 3 times. 10%. His uncle had been a 10% man. He scrolled further. Marcus had included a second document in the same folder. This one was shorter. It carried the same letterhead, the same kind of notarization stamp, and a date 3 weeks after the night a Mercedes had gone into the Charles River. On its face, it was a codicil, a small amendment to the will above, the signatures of the same two witnesses, a new notary. Vincent Hale's signature, shakier now, on the line at the bottom, which was interesting, because by the date on that page, Vincent Hale had been 6 feet underground for 18 days. The codicil did 3 things. It transferred all operational authority over the estate to Nathaniel Vincent Hale, in accordance with the original instrument. It then added, in a subclause of elegant and devastating brevity, that in the event of the heir's incapacitation due to medical or cognitive impairment, all administrative powers over the estate should devolve upon his uncle Arthur Francis Hale, until such time as 2 independent medical authorities should certify the heir's full and sustained recovery. 2 independent medical authorities. One of them, Preston already knew, was Dr. Rebecca Stone. Preston sat back in his chair. The math of 6 years unfolded in front of him with the cold neatness of a bank statement. Every quarter, Stone had certified that he was not recovered. Every quarter, the codicil had renewed itself. Every quarter, Arthur had remained the sole signatory on accounts that, in law, belonged to his nephew. Preston opened the offshore subfolder next. 12 shell companies, Delaware, Belize, the Isle of Man. One of them registered to a post office box 2 blocks from a cafe in Valletta. Marcus had included the transfer histories. Over 6 years, across all 12, $41 million had moved out of Hale shipping accounts and into the hands of entities whose directors, on paper, were a combination of dead relatives and people who did not exist. He opened the meetings folder last. 3 photographs. They were grainy, taken with a long lens through the window of a restaurant. The restaurant was in Charlestown. Preston recognized the tile floor. In the first photograph, Arthur sat across from a red-faced man in his 60s with a napkin tucked into his collar. In the second, the 2 men were shaking hands. In the third, a folder was changing sides of the table. The red-faced man was Sean O'Brien. Preston knew that face. He knew it the way a wolf knows the face of another wolf on the other side of a river. The Hales and the O'Briens had been killing each other politely over the Conley terminal for 3 generations. Arthur was not just stealing from the estate. Arthur was selling the estate out from under it, and a puppet whose strings no longer paid for themselves was a puppet that got cut down. Preston closed the laptop. The kitchen had gone very quiet. Clara had finished her half of the sandwich. She had one elbow on the table and her chin resting on her small fist, and she was watching him with the patience of a child who had learned, long before she should have, how to wait for adults to tell her what the grown-up world had decided. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. Preston looked at her. He thought of the man in the white room, the man with his own face, mouthing 3 words over a shoulder as 2 strangers walked him to a door. "Tell my daughter, I am going to finish," Preston said, "what your father was not allowed to." They left Somerville at 4 a.m. in a rented Honda that had been returned to a different lot under a name Marcus had made up the night before. Clara slept against the passenger window for the first 2 hours. Preston drove with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. The interstate north out of Boston was empty at that hour, except for the long-haul trucks and the occasional state trooper, and he passed each of them with the careful attention of a man who had decided not to be noticed for any reason at all. The sky went pink over the New Hampshire border. It was full daylight by the time they crossed the bridge into Maine. Portland, it turned out, was a city of hills and weathered wood and the smell of salt. Clara woke up somewhere on I-295 and sat forward and pointed without a word. She remembered the exits. She remembered the turn onto Munjoy Hill. She remembered the 3rd driveway on the left, on a narrow street called Atlantic. The house was small, a single-story cottage, painted the soft gray of a rain cloud, with white trim that needed touching up and a porch that faced the bay, a cedar tree in the front yard, a hand-painted mailbox with Whitman still on the side and a looping script Preston now recognized. Clara had the key on a shoelace around her neck. She unlocked the door. The inside of the house smelled the way the houses of recently dead women smell, which is to say, not of dust, but of the particular silence that is left behind when somebody who cleaned has stopped cleaning. A vase of lilies on the kitchen counter had gone brown. A mug sat on the drying rack. Eleanor's slippers were set neatly beside the couch. Nothing had been moved. Mom did not change Dad's things, Clara said, softly. Not after. She kept his room the way he left it. She said it was like a promise. Show me. Clara led him down a short hallway to a door at the back of the house. It had been a bedroom once, and then a study. A small oak desk faced the window. A bookshelf held a battered Haynes manual for a 1992 Ford pickup, a paperback copy of The Old Man and the Sea, and a framed photograph of an infant Clara asleep on her father's chest. Clara crossed to the far corner of the room. She knelt on the painted floorboards and pressed her palm flat on one of them. It rocked, very slightly, under the weight of her hand. Mom told me about this last year, she said. She said if anything ever happened, I should look. Preston knelt beside her. He worked his fingernails under the edge of the board. It lifted cleanly, hinged on a single iron pin at the back. Below it, set into a cavity between the joists, was a small metal box. He lifted the box out. It was not heavy. Inside was a single leather-bound notebook. The cover was scuffed and stained. A rubber band had been wound twice around it to keep the pages closed. Tucked into the rubber band was a folded piece of paper that said, in block letters, "For Clara, when she is old enough." Preston set the notebook on the desk. He took off the rubber band. The first entry was dated 6 years ago in April. The handwriting was steady, careful, the handwriting of a mechanic who had learned to write receipts in neat block letters. It began, "They took me off the street on a Thursday. I do not know where I am. There are no windows. The man who is in charge is called Arthur. He says I look like his nephew. He says I am going to be useful." Preston turned the pages. Each entry was short. Each was dated. Together, they mapped 180 days of captivity in a cabin somewhere in the Berkshires. Daniel had been made to memorize a family tree. He had been made to practice a signature until his hand ached. He had been made to sit in a chair and watch footage of Nathaniel Hale eating dinner and getting out of cars and greeting his mother, hour after hour, day after day, until the tilt of Nathaniel's head was his own tilt of his head. In one entry, Daniel had written, "They broke the small finger of my left hand today because I used the wrong fork at a pretend dinner. They said Nathaniel would not make that mistake. They said the real boss knows which fork is for fish." Preston stopped. He turned his own left hand palm up. The small finger was slightly crooked at the top knuckle. He had always been told it was from a childhood bicycle fall. He turned the page. The entries grew shorter toward the end, quieter. The handwriting got a little worse. The last entry in the notebook was dated the last day of October, 6 years before. "I know what they are planning to do to me. I have known for 3 days. I will not be coming home. If someone finds this book, and Eleanor is not here to find it first, then please, I am begging whoever you are, tell my daughter that her father loved her. Tell her that every morning of her life, for as long as I was allowed to have it, the first thought in my head was her face. And tell the real Nathaniel, whoever he turns out to be, that I do not hold this against him. I have never met him. I do not know his voice. But I know a man does not choose to have his life taken and worn by somebody else. We are both the ones this was done to. I am sorry I could not find a way to bring him out with me. Tell him I forgive him for being alive. Daniel Whitman." Preston closed the book. He slid down off the desk chair until he was sitting on the painted floorboards with his back against the wall. He held the notebook against his chest with both hands, the way a man holds something that has just died in his arms. He did not make any sound. Clara walked across the room. She did not ask permission. She sat down on the floor beside him, and she put her small arms around as much of him as she could reach, and she leaned her cheek against his shoulder. "My dad was a good man," she said. "No." Preston's voice came out cracked and dry. "Your dad was a hero." They sat there for a long time on the bedroom floor of a dead man's house, and somewhere during that silence, Preston understood, with a clarity he had not felt in 6 years, that there was exactly one road left open to him. He was going to take his uncle apart. They left Portland at dusk. Preston had put the notebook inside a Ziploc bag, and then inside the spare tire well of the Honda. He had pressed a kiss to the top of Clara's head, locked the front door of the cottage, and taped the spare key to the underside of the mailbox for a neighbor to find. Eleanor had died in a hospital. The house would have to outlast all of them. They picked up I-95 southbound outside Portsmouth. The highway was quiet. Clara sat in the back seat now, because Preston had thought about it and did not want her airbag in her face if something happened. He had given her his jacket to pull over her shoulders. She had fallen asleep inside of 30 minutes, mouth open, notebook pressed against her ribs through the layers of wool. Preston drove with his eyes on the mirrors as much as the road. He saw the first black SUV merge in behind him on the stretch of highway south of Newburyport. He saw the second one come up on his left a mile later. He did not need to see the license plates. He recognized the vehicles. Arthur had a fleet of 8 of them. Preston had ridden in one of them to a meeting at the Parker house 3 weeks ago. Clara. She came awake instantly. No fuss. The child of a mother who had been afraid for her for a very long time. I need you to do 3 things. You are going to take your seatbelt off. You are going to slide down onto the floor behind my seat. You are going to put your hands over the back of your neck, and you are going to keep them there. Do you understand me? Yes. She did it in 6 seconds. The SUV on his left edged forward. Preston saw the passenger window slide down. He saw the dull black shape inside it. He did not wait for it to come up. He stood on the brake. The Honda shrieked. The SUV on his left overshot him by 4 car lengths. The SUV behind him clipped the rear bumper, fishtailed, and skidded into the guardrail at 55 miles an hour in an explosion of plastic trim and orange sparks. Preston swerved onto the shoulder, killed the lights, and threw the transmission into park. He had 1 pistol in the glove compartment and 1 in a holster under the driver's seat. He came out the passenger side low, because the passenger side was away from both vehicles. He came out with a gun in each hand. He came out the way a man comes out of a car when his body, if not his mind, has been doing this since he was 20. The first man was climbing out of the wrecked SUV behind him. Preston shot him in the thigh before the man's second foot hit the pavement. The man went down screaming. The second man was walking up the shoulder from the lead SUV. He raised a pistol. Preston fired 3 times. The man spun sideways into the guardrail and slid down it. Something hot punched through the meat of Preston's left shoulder at the same instant. He did not feel it right away. That would come later. He turned, found the shooter leaning out of the driver's window of the lead SUV, and put 2 rounds through the windshield. The glass went white. The SUV drifted forward on its own, climbed the grass embankment, and stopped. Headlights flared behind him. Preston spun with both guns raised. Boss, it is me. Stand down. Marcus. Marcus in a black Suburban, 2 cars behind him, 4 of his own men piling out with weapons up. Preston lowered his pistols. His knees considered giving out, and then decided to hold. He leaned against the open door of the Honda and looked down. Blood was running down the inside of his left sleeve. It was starting to pool in his palm. He flexed the hand. The fingers still worked. Through and through, he said, to nobody in particular. Clara was sitting up in the back seat now, wide-eyed. She had not screamed. She had not cried. She was just looking at him. Marcus reached them in 6 strides. He checked the wound with quick, clinical hands. He pulled a folded handkerchief out of his jacket and pressed it hard against the entry. Arthur moved early. I noticed. He knows you are remembering. He is not going to wait for the next quarterly appointment with Stone. We are out of runway, Nathaniel. Preston looked past Marcus at the 2 SUVs burning gently on the shoulder of I-95. I am done running. Good. Because we cannot run anymore. Not with her. Marcus jerked his chin at Clara. We need to put her somewhere he will not look. And we need to do it tonight. Street Leonard's. Marcus agreed. 90 minutes later, in the narrow alley behind the old Italian church in the North End, Preston knelt on cold cobblestones so that his face was level with Clara's. His shoulder was bandaged. His sleeve was pinned up with a safety pin. Father Thomas stood in the doorway of the sacristy, a wool blanket over one arm. Clara, you are going to stay here with Father Thomas. The church has an apartment upstairs. Nobody knows it exists. You are going to eat the food he gives you. You are going to read the books. You are not going to leave the building, not even into the alley. Do you understand? Yes. Her small hand slid into his. Chew, she said. The word cracked a little. Do you promise you will come back? Preston leaned forward. He pressed his lips to the soft hair at the crown of her head. I promise, he said. Family never dies. Clara went very still. She pulled back. She stared up at him. Her eyes had gone enormous in her small face. What? Family never dies. That is what my dad used to say. Her voice had dropped to a whisper. Every night, when he tucked me in. Every single night. How do you know that? Preston did not have an answer for her. He only knew, as he handed her over to the priest and walked back out into the dark street, that two men, in two different lives, had somehow learned to say exactly the same words to the same little girl. Marcus moved him to a different safe house that night. It was a brick row house in East Cambridge with painted-over windows and a steel-reinforced door and no address on the mail slot. Marcus's cousin owned it on paper. Marcus's cousin had been dead for 9 years. There was a bathroom upstairs. There was a mattress on the floor of the back bedroom. There was a kitchen with a stocked pantry and nothing else. Marcus unpacked the first aid kit on the table and cleaned and stitched the bullet graze on Preston's shoulder with the calm hands of a man who had done this work before, under worse light, in worse places. When he finished, he pulled a small bottle from his pocket and set it beside the bandages. These are the pills Stone prescribed you. Every night, 1 tablet, with water. You have been taking them for 6 years. Preston looked at the bottle. And if I stop, 3 days, maybe 4, it is going to feel like somebody is peeling the inside of your head with a razor blade. You will sweat through 2 sets of sheets. You will vomit. You may hallucinate. On the other side of it, if you come through the other side of it, you will remember. Put them in the toilet. Marcus picked the bottle up. I will be downstairs. I will check on you every 2 hours. If you need water, knock on the floor. The first 12 hours were bearable. The second 12 hours were not. Something tightened behind Preston's eyes at sunset on the first day and began, slowly, to pull. His vision fractured. Every light in the room had a halo around it. His hands would not stop shaking. He lay on the mattress on his side, and he breathed through his teeth the way a man breathes through a cramp. Somewhere in the second night, he began to remember. It came in no order. A kitchen in Beacon Hill. On a Saturday morning, sunlight on yellow tile. A woman in a bathrobe, his mother, pouring him orange juice from a glass pitcher. Her name was Caroline. Her laugh was low and quick. A summer afternoon, 8 years old, on the lawn of a lake house in the Berkshires, his father teaching him how to cast a fishing line, Vincent's big hand over his small one on the rod. The summer of his 18th birthday, the sacristy at Street Leonard's, a needle and bay rum aftershave, and a promise about a mark that would protect him. A Thursday night in October, 6 years before. His own study. A row of leather-bound ledgers open on his desk, phone records spread across the blotter, a cold understanding forming in his chest as the columns lined up. Uncle Arthur, selling Conley piece by piece to the O'Briens. Uncle Arthur, bleeding the organization out through shell companies. Uncle Arthur, taking kickbacks from Sean O'Brien in an envelope Nathaniel had personally photographed 3 weeks earlier without knowing what he was looking at. The drive that night toward his father's house on Louisburg Square. The Mercedes. The rain. A black pickup truck coming through a red light on Starrow Drive. The spin. The water. The dark. And then, the white room. Again. But further into it this time. Past the moment the door opened. Past Arthur's hand on his cheek. He is untied now. His wrists are free. He is standing on his feet, barely, 2 weeks into whatever they have been pumping into him. His legs do not quite belong to him. He is wearing a hospital gown. A man is sitting in a chair on the other side of the room. His wrists are tied to the armrests. His head is down. Nathaniel crosses to him. The man looks up. Nathaniel sees his own face. I am sorry, the other man says. His voice is soft. It is not Nathaniel's voice. It is a voice from a mechanic shop in Portland, Maine. They told me they would kill my wife and my daughter if I did not do this. They showed me photographs of the house. They knew Clara's bedtime. They knew what street my wife parked on for work. I had no choice. What is your name? Daniel. Nathaniel kneels in front of the chair. He puts his hands on the other man's knees. Listen to me, Daniel. We are going to find a way out of here, both of us. I do not know how yet, but there is no version of this where I walk out and leave you sitting in that chair. Do you hear me? Daniel's eyes fill. Okay, he whispers. Okay. The door opens behind them. Arthur is standing there, hands in the pockets of a charcoal suit, wearing the small, polite smile he wore at funerals. Boys, I do not think you have understood me. His voice is warm, almost affectionate. Only one of you walks out of this room. That has always been the arrangement. I merely had not decided. Until this morning, which... Nathaniel starts to rise. A fist connects with the back of his skull. The white tile comes up fast. Preston came back to the bedroom in East Cambridge with a strangled sound in his throat. He was kneeling on the mattress. His sheets were soaked. His shoulder had bled through the bandage. Daniel Whitman had not died because he was unlucky. Daniel Whitman had died because he had let Arthur believe he was the easier man to kill, so that Clara would live. Preston bent forward over his own knees and cried the way men cry when they finally understand what it costs somebody else to save them. He cried for a long time. When he was finished, he stood up, walked down the narrow staircase in his bare feet, and found Marcus in the kitchen with a mug of coffee gone cold. "I remember," he said. "All of it? All of it. Then what do we do?" Preston looked at him. "We tell Clara the truth, every piece of it. And then we finish this." The meeting happened in the sacristy of Street Leonard's at 11 o'clock the next night. Father Thomas had turned the lock on the alley door and pulled the heavy velvet curtain across the small interior window. Clara was asleep in the apartment 2 floors above them, guarded by a nun. Father Thomas trusted with his life, and by a man of Marcus's who had been stationed in a folding chair at the top of the stairs. 4 people sat at a scarred wooden table in the basement. Preston, Marcus, Father Thomas, and a woman in her middle 40s with a navy suit jacket, a federal identification badge clipped to her lapel, and the particular stillness of a person who had spent the last 2 years of her life waiting for a phone call exactly like the one she had received that afternoon. "Special Agent Lisa Caldwell," she said, when Preston set the flash drive on the table between them. "Boston Field Office. I run the Organized Crime Task Force. Your uncle has had a file on my desk for 26 months. I can tell you, Mr. Hale, without exaggeration, that the folder is 6 inches thick. Then you know what is on this. I know what we think is on it. We have surveillance. We have wire intercepts. We have a forensic accountant who could explain the shell companies to a jury of kindergartners. What we do not have is a witness who was in the room. Now you do." Agent Caldwell looked at him. Her eyes did not move. "You are prepared to testify, under your real name, on the record, to everything you have told me in the last 2 hours. Yes, racketeering, money laundering, kidnapping, attempted homicide. Yes. You understand that when this is over, there will be no more Hale organization. There will be no shipping company. There will be no waterfront. The structure your grandfather built, whatever is left of the legitimate part of it, will be unwound by receivers in a federal courtroom. I understand. And the illegitimate part, you take every piece of it. I will not ask for a single concession on that. I will need concessions on 2 people, Marcus said, quietly. Agent Caldwell turned. Go on. Myself, and 3 of our capos who have not, to my knowledge, been involved in anything beyond what the company legally operates. Sal Bianchi, Benny DeLuca, Anthony Ricci. If they cooperate, I want immunity agreements on their desks by Friday morning. You are asking the United States government to grant immunity to 4 members of a Mafia family. I am asking the United States government to let 4 men who spent 6 years trying to keep a kidnapped man alive walk out the other side of this with their names intact. Agent Caldwell held Marcus's eyes for a long moment. I will take it to my AUSA tonight, she said. I will not make promises I cannot keep, Mr. Doyle, but I will fight for it. That is what I can offer you. That is enough. They talked then about the shape of it. Saturday night, the 6th anniversary, to the day, of the Mercedes going into the river. Preston would call a full council meeting at the Hale estate on Beacon Hill. He would tell Arthur, through the usual channels, that he was ready to discuss formally transferring operational control of the family to his uncle. Arthur would come. Arthur would not be able to resist coming. Arthur had been waiting for this precise sentence from his puppet nephew for 6 years, and when the puppet finally said it, he would walk in through the front door of that house, believing himself to be the protagonist of his own story. 12 capos would be seated at the long dining room table. Preston would not transfer control. He would stand up at his seat, place certain objects on the table, and say certain words, and at the moment those words were spoken, Agent Caldwell and 22 federal agents would be arrayed in a perimeter around the property, listening to every syllable through the wire taped to Preston's chest. What happened next would depend on the capos. And the girl, Agent Caldwell said. Preston did not flinch. If this goes wrong, he said, if I do not walk out of that house on Saturday night, I want Clara Whitman placed in federal protective custody before sunrise on Sunday morning. New identity. New state, the best people you have, for as long as she needs it. I will personally handle it, thank you. The meeting ended at 3 a.m. Agent Caldwell let herself out the alley door. Marcus went upstairs to check on Clara. Father Thomas sat with Preston at the table as the last of the candles on the side altar guttered in the far room. I need paper, Preston said. And a pen. Father Thomas brought him both. Preston wrote for 20 minutes without looking up. When he was done, He folded the pages into thirds, slid them into an envelope, sealed it, and wrote 2 words on the front. For Clara. He slid it across the table to the priest. "If I am not back by noon on Sunday," he said, "you give her this, not before. Do you understand?" "I understand." The old man did not take the envelope in his hand. He reached, instead, across the table, and he laid his palm on the crown of Preston's head, the way he had once laid his palm on an 8-day-old baby at the baptismal font, and he said, in a voice that was low and steady and old, "Il Signore ti accompagni, my son." "The Lord walk with you, my son." And Preston, who had not believed in very much for a very long time, bowed his head and let him. The house on Louisburg Square had not been used for a full council meeting in 3 years. Preston arrived at 8 o'clock on Saturday night in a black suit and a white shirt without a tie. The wire taped along his sternum itched against the bandage over his shoulder. Marcus rode in the passenger seat with his hand inside his jacket. Neither of them had spoken for the last half of the drive from Cambridge. The capos were already in the dining room. 12 men around a dining table meant for 16. Under a chandelier Preston's great-grandfather had carried across the Atlantic in 1921. Arthur was at the far end, in Vincent's chair, wearing a dark gray suit and the small, pleasant smile he had worn for 6 years. He rose when Preston entered. "Nephew." "At last. Sit, sit. We have all been waiting." Preston walked the length of the table. He did not sit. He went to the seat at the head, his own seat, the one Arthur had just risen from, and he stood behind it, with his hands resting on the carved wood. Arthur returned to the seat on his right, without comment. "Gentlemen." Arthur raised his wineglass. His voice was warm, the voice of a man about to deliver a toast at a wedding. 6 years ago tonight, I lost a brother and very nearly lost a nephew. My brother Vincent's heart, God rest him, gave out the same week my nephew's car went into the Charles. I have thought, every single day since, that Providence left me one Hale to protect, and I have protected him with every breath I have drawn. The capos murmured. Tonight, that nephew has called us together to recognize something that has, I think, been quietly true for some time now. That it is time for the next generation of this family to come fully into its own. Arthur's smile widened, almost imperceptibly. Nathaniel. Preston. Whatever we are calling you tonight, the floor is yours. Preston did not sit down. He reached inside his jacket. He withdrew a photograph. He laid it in the exact center of the long table. The capos leaned forward, one at a time. 12 sets of eyes settled on the image of a man standing on a wooden porch somewhere green and quiet, a blonde woman beside him, a newborn asleep on his shoulder. The man in the photograph had Preston's face. The room went still. Preston spoke quietly. He did not need to raise his voice. The chandelier did not need to help him. In that silence, a whisper would have reached the street. "The man in this photograph," he said, "is not me. His name was Daniel Whitman. He was a mechanic from Portland, Maine. 6 years ago tonight, he died wearing my suit, in my car, in my name. His daughter is 8 years old. She is, at this moment, under the protection of a priest in the North End, because the man who ordered her father killed is sitting at this table pretending to be my family." Arthur did not move. His glass was halfway to the table. It stayed there, the smile on his face adjusted by a millimeter. "Oh, Nathaniel." He set the glass down. "Oh, my poor boy. Dr. Stone warned me this might happen. I told her the dosage was too low. I told her your subconscious was building fantasies around the trauma. She will come tonight. We will get you rest. I stopped taking her pills 8 days ago," Preston said, "and I remember everything." He reached into his jacket again. The notebook came out first, leather-bound, rubber-banded, stained at the corners. He set it down beside the photograph. Daniel Whitman's diary, 180 days, in his own handwriting, describing his kidnapping, his coaching, and his impending murder at the hands of the man on my right. A copy of Vincent Hale's original will came next, 12 pages stapled at the corner. My grandfather's actual will, the one in which Arthur inherits 10%, not the forged codicil that made him regent of this family for 6 years. A sheaf of surveillance photographs last. Arthur at a restaurant in Charlestown, sitting across from Sean O'Brien, a folder passing between them, and this, his meetings with our cousins from the other side of the water, from whom he has been taking commissions to sell them the Conley roots one berth at a time. He looked down the table. "That is who I am," he said, "and this is who he is. Now the 12 of you have a choice to make." Sal Bianchi's hand moved inside his jacket. Benny DeLuca's hand moved inside his. 2 more hands at the far end of the table moved too. Preston could not tell which of them had moved to draw, and which had moved to defend. Marcus rose from his chair on the left side of the table. He took one slow, deliberate step backward, so that he stood at Preston's shoulder, facing the room, his own pistol still holstered but his hand resting on the grip. "I stand with Nathaniel." Silence. Then Sal Bianchi stood. Benny DeLuca stood. Anthony Ricci stood. A fourth man, Joey Moretti, stood last and stood slowest, but he stood. 5 chairs on Preston's side of the table, 7 on Arthur's. Arthur's pleasant face broke open at last. The smile went. What was underneath it had no softness left in it at all. "Kill him," he said. He said it almost conversationally. He said it at the same moment that the front doors of the house, and the French doors off the garden, and the service entrance from the kitchen, and the second-floor terrace door, all came open at once, and federal agents in dark windbreakers came through every one of them at a full run with their weapons raised and the letters FBI across their chests. Federal agents. Hands, all of you, hands on the table. 2 of Arthur's capos froze with their pistols half drawn. Arthur did not freeze. His hand went to the inside of his jacket, with the steady calm of a man who had known, the moment the photograph had touched the wood, exactly how this evening was going to end for him. The pistol came out. It came up. The barrel began to track toward Preston's chest. Marcus shot him in the shoulder from 4 feet away. The round went through the meat and out the back of the jacket, and took a plate of china off the sideboard behind him. Arthur spun, hit the edge of the table, and went down hard against the chair Vincent Hale had once owned. The pistol clattered across the floor. He was still alive. He was still breathing. Agent Caldwell was already through the doorway. Weapon up, cuffs out. She was, Preston noted, smiling very slightly, in a way he had not seen her smile in any of their previous meetings. "Arthur Francis Hale," she said, "you are under arrest." 3 days later, the indictment came down. 47 counts: racketeering, money laundering, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, obstruction of justice. 2 additional counts relating to the forgery of a federal testamentary instrument. Arthur Francis Hale was arraigned from a hospital bed at Brigham and Women's, the bullet still in his shoulder because the surgeons had not felt rushed to remove it. Bail was denied before the judge had finished reading the complaint. Dr. Rebecca Stone surrendered to federal custody at sunrise the next morning. The Hale Shipping Company was placed into receivership by a Suffolk County court. The Conley terminal contracts were suspended pending review. The offshore shell companies were frozen in 4 jurisdictions on 3 continents by a coordinated action that had been prepared, as it turned out, 19 months in advance. By Wednesday morning, the organization was gone. Preston did not mourn it. He sat with Agent Caldwell for 11 hours across 2 days in a windowless conference room in the federal building, and he told her everything. Every name, every date, every envelope he had ever signed for without reading it. The immunity agreements for Marcus, Sal, Benny, and Anthony came through on Friday afternoon. On Saturday morning, Preston drove alone to street Leonard's and walked up the narrow stairs behind the sacristy to the small apartment where Clara had been living for 6 days. She was sitting at the kitchen table when he came in. She was wearing a dress the nun had bought for her, soft blue cotton with small white flowers, and her hair had been brushed and braided by someone who had loved doing it. Father Thomas was drying a teacup at the sink. He looked up when Preston stepped into the room and he set the cup down without a word, and he found somewhere else to be. Clara stood. She did not run to him. She walked. She crossed the small kitchen, and she stopped in front of him, and she looked up into his face. "You came back. I told you I would. Is he in jail?" "Yes. He is in jail. He is going to stay there for a very long time." She nodded once, as though filing away a detail she had needed to confirm. Then she slid her hand into his. "Where are we going now? I want to take you somewhere first, if that is all right." The cemetery was in Medford. It sat on a small hill behind a Catholic school, with a view of the Mystic River through a row of sugar maples. Preston parked on the gravel access road and took Clara's hand, and they walked together along the paths that ran between the older stones until he stopped in front of a gray granite marker near the back wall. The stone read, "Preston Nathaniel Hale, beloved son," and a single date, 6 years old. Clara read the letters slowly. She had been taught to read by a mother who had worked very hard at it, and she was good at it now. When she finished, she looked up at Preston. Her face had not yet decided what to do. "The name on this stone," Preston said, "is mine, but the man buried underneath it is not me." He knelt down on the grass so that he was level with her. "It is your father, Clara. They buried him here, in my suit, under my name, because that was part of what they did to both of us. I came here today because I wanted you to know. And because I am going to pay a stonemason, first thing Monday morning, to take this marker down and put the right one up. A stone that says Daniel Whitman on it, in letters any passerby can read, so that for the rest of the time this cemetery stands, your father has his name back. Clara did not answer him at first. She let go of his hand. She knelt in the grass. She laid her palm flat on the front of the gray stone, over the letters that had been chiseled there 6 years ago under a false understanding of the world, and she closed her eyes. Her shoulders started to shake. She did not make a sound. She had learned, somewhere along the way, to cry without sound. Preston reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and brought out a single white rose Father Thomas had given him when they left the church. He placed it on the grass in front of the stone, beside her hand. Clara, she opened her eyes. I cannot give him back to you. I would, if there were any way in any world I could do it. I cannot. That is the one thing I cannot fix. He had to pause. His throat had gone thick. But if you will let me, I want to take care of you. Not because I owe your father a debt, though I do. Not because your mother asked me to, in her letter, though she did. He drew a breath. Because you are the one who walked into that restaurant. You gave me back my memory. You gave me back my name. You gave me back my soul. Whatever I have left, whatever kind of man I am still able to be, is yours, if you will have it. She did not answer for a long time. A wind came off the river and moved through the sugar maples. Then Clara turned her head. She looked at him with eyes that were wet and steady and enormous in her small face. And she said, My dad said something before he died. Mom told me. The last thing he said, Tell the real one. He is not a bad man. He is a man that bad men took everything from. Tell him I do not blame him. She reached out. She put her small damp hand flat on Preston's cheek. I forgive you, she said. Preston Hale, whose real name was Nathaniel, who had been a boss, and a puppet, and a coward, and a survivor, pulled a little girl into his arms on the grass of a cemetery in Medford and cried the way he had never in his life allowed himself to cry. 6 months passed. The maple trees along Brattle Street went from green to copper to bare, and then the first real snow of the season fell over the Charles River on a Tuesday morning in early December. By then, the man who had once signed papers as Preston Hale had spent nearly half a year signing them as Nathaniel again. The probate court had restored his name. The driver's license was new, the bank accounts were new. Most mornings he did not have to pause anymore before he wrote his signature. Everything the organization had built on the wrong side of the law was gone. Nathaniel had sold what could be sold, dissolved what could be dissolved, and turned over to federal forfeiture what could not be sold or dissolved. What remained, after the lawyers and the courts and the taxes, was a surprisingly small amount of money by the standard of what the Hale name had once controlled, and a very large amount by any ordinary human measure. He put almost all of it into a foundation, the Whitman Foundation, it was called, incorporated in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Its charter filed on the 12th day of July. Its stated purpose was the support of surviving families of victims of organized crime, widows, children, parents who had been told their sons had drowned, or crashed, or simply walked away. The foundation paid for funerals that had never been properly held. It paid for therapists. It paid college tuition for 143 young people in its first year alone. Marcus ran it. He had turned in his gun on a Friday and shown up to an office with his name on the door the following Monday. And Nathaniel had never in his life seen a man look more at peace behind a desk. The adoption was finalized in October. Nathaniel Hale, a single man in his late 30s with no criminal record and a newly opened nonprofit, was not, on paper, a particularly surprising candidate to a Massachusetts family court. The judge had read the file and looked over her glasses at the small girl sitting very straight in her chair, and she had asked Clara, gently, whether she wished to be adopted by this gentleman. Clara had said, Yes, Your Honor, in the clear, steady voice she had inherited from a mother who had taught her how to look strangers in the eye. The paperwork had been signed that afternoon. The house they lived in was not the penthouse. It was a narrow wood-frame bungalow on a quiet street in Cambridge, 2 blocks from the river. There was a small front yard with a single dogwood tree. There was a porch swing that creaked. There was a kitchen with yellow tile that had reminded Nathaniel, the first time he had seen the listing, of a summer morning in Beacon Hill 40 years ago. On a Thursday afternoon in the first week of December, he was standing in that kitchen stirring a pot of soup. The front door opened. Small boots stomped snow onto the mat. A backpack hit the floor. Dad? Dad, I am home. Nathaniel's hand stopped over the pot. She had never called him that before. For 6 months she had called him Chew, and then Nathaniel, and then, cautiously, during the last 2 weeks of the adoption paperwork, nothing at all, because she had not quite been able to choose. He had not pushed. He had understood that the word, when she was ready to say it, would have to come from a place where no one had asked her to say it. It had come now, in a hallway in Cambridge, in a voice that was not practiced. He set the wooden spoon down on the counter. He turned. Clara was standing in the kitchen doorway with her cheeks pink from the cold and a folded piece of construction paper in both mittened hands. She looked up at him with the face of a child who had drawn something on the last day of the semester and had been thinking about showing it to him the whole way home on the bus. "I made this in art class," she said. She held it out. Nathaniel took it with hands that had gone a little unsteady. It was a crayon drawing. 3 figures stood in the front yard of a small wooden house with a dogwood tree. A tall man in a dark coat, a small girl in a blue jacket holding his hand. And behind them, drawn in pale yellow that the child had clearly labored to get just right, an angel with outstretched wings and a gentle face that had Daniel Whitman's jaw and Daniel Whitman's slight crooked smile and Daniel Whitman's kind, steady eyes. At the bottom of the page, in careful blue crayon, she had written one word: family. Nathaniel's eyes had gone wet. He did not bother pretending they had not. He knelt down on the kitchen tile. He pulled his daughter into his arms and held her there, mittens and snow and backpack straps and all, and he pressed his face into her hair. "Family never dies," he whispered into it. "Your dad is still right here." Outside the kitchen window, the snow came down on the quiet Cambridge street, and a dogwood tree that had dropped the last of its leaves a month ago stood bare and patient and waiting for spring. Sometimes the greatest sins in a man's life are paid back by the smallest hearts. Sometimes an 8-year-old child, carrying a folded piece of paper in a denim pocket, can save a man who has been lost to himself for longer than he knew. Because family, the real kind, is not made of blood. It is made of the choice, on an ordinary afternoon, to stay. Nathaniel chose to stay. Clara chose to forgive. And in the end, it was not a mafia boss who rescued a little girl. It was a little girl who rescued a mafia boss. This story asks us a hard question. How many of the people around us are carrying a truth they have been too afraid to speak? How many of us are walking through our own lives under names we did not choose, in silences that were chosen for us by somebody else? And what would it cost, just once, to sit down beside one of them and listen? If this story moved you, if it made you think of someone in your own life, please take a moment to let us know in the comments. What part of Clara and Nathaniel's journey touched you the most? Do you know someone who, like Daniel Whitman, gave everything for the people they loved without ever being thanked? Share their story below. We read every comment, and we are grateful for every one of you who walks this road with us. Please hit the like button so this story can reach others who need it tonight. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you will not miss the new stories we post every day. And share this video with one person you love, because family, as Nathaniel learned, is not something we are given. It is something we choose. To everyone watching, wherever you are in the world tonight, we wish you good health, a peaceful heart, and quiet joy in the small, ordinary moments of your life. May the people at your kitchen table tonight be the ones who chose to stay. Thank you for listening. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next story.